Hey, my friend, would you like to learn how to increase your energy as a woman over 50? On this podcast, my friend Zora talks about gerontology, which is the study of the mental, the biological, and the societal aspects of aging. And she also drops a lot of tips on how women over 50 can get into biohacking and increase their energy. Stay tuned for a great episode. If you're looking to get thicker, fuller, and stronger hair, make sure to check out fullyvital.com. We've developed a set of natural products that help you with hair wellness from within and from the outside. So make sure to check out fullyvital.com and use code anti-aging hacks for 15% off your order. Are you enjoying some of the videos on this channel? If you are, please make sure to click the button below so you can subscribe to this channel and get notified when we release new episodes. Our goal on this channel is to give you simple tips that you can utilize in your life to look and feel younger and reverse your aging. So if that sounds good to you, please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can get notified when we release the next episode. Hey, my friend, welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, I have my friend Zora Benhamou on, and she is a gerontologist passionate about aging, health span, and longevity. She's on a mission to disrupt ageist stereotypes in social media and is the host of the Hack My Age podcast, focusing on biohacking for women over 50. Zora is a 52-year-old digital nomad, traveled to 50 countries, lived in 8, and speaks 6 languages. She founded the website hackmyage.com, the Hack My Age podcast, and is the author of the Longevity Master Plan and cookbook Eating for Longevity. Her social media and podcast following reaches about 100,000 people and is growing quickly. She's also a member of the Gerontological Society of America. Zora received a master's of gerontology at the prestigious University of Southern California. She's a certified sports nutrition coach, completed the Menopause for Athletes program by Dr. Stacy Sims, and is a certified Oxygen Advantage Advanced Breathwork instructor. With that said, Zora, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. And gosh, it's fantastic to be able to speak the same language and anti-aging and so much more.
Yeah, you've got a fascinating background. You're a digital nomad. You've been to 50 countries, which I love because I'm a traveler myself, and I'm a little jealous that you can live in different countries and still work and be productive, which I struggle with sometimes because I get so excited when I go to a new country. I'm like, let's go explore instead of working. So yeah. So tell us about your background, your digital life, and then how you got interested into aging of all things.
Oh, wow. So the nomad life actually started probably as an expat life when I was 7. And I was living in Brazil and Indonesia, and when I was 10, and then just completely went after that. So, we're a family that has wings, not roots. You have roots, so you have wings. So I was born with wings. So it's in my DNA to just always want to travel, always want to be somewhere else. And there's advantages and there's disadvantages to that. So, but I was lucky to meet my husband, who's got wings as well. And when our kids grew up and left the home, we said, well, there's no reason to be in Hong Kong where we were at the time. And we just sold our house, sold our car, sold our things, and said, you know what, let's see what happens. We know life changes. Let's just become nomads, because when you have children, you can't quite have that nomad life, but an expat life, which some people would say, okay, that's somewhat of a nomad life as well. And we were traveling, living out of a suitcase for 2 years until the pandemic hit. Then we got stuck in Spain, and that was actually perfect timing because I was starting my master's of gerontology program and just graduated in May. And now we're back on the road and living the nomad life. So for now, we're enjoying it. There's again, so much to share about the nomad life, but I'll just stop it there for now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. I love it. Okay. So you just got your master's in gerontology, which some people listening to the podcast might not even know what it is. So let's start there. What is a gerontologist and what do they do?
So a gerontologist is someone who studies aging, but from not only a biological perspective, like we do in the biohacking world, but from a psychological and a sociological perspective. And what we look at is not only older adults, because when I first heard about this program, I was like, well, I don't want to just study older adults.
Mm-hmm.
And they corrected me and they said, no, you have to look at the life course, the whole life course from birth until death. And actually even before birth, in terms of intergenerational DNA that gets, passed on and modified and everything because of maybe some trauma. So it is quite amazing. So we're looking at so many things from birth to death and how that influences aging and diseases of aging, why we age, how we age. And my purpose is always to figure out, okay, well, how can we slow aging or make the whole, the last, whatever, 30 years we say of our health span, which is not there, better, longer, and stronger. We want to live free of disease and full of vitality. So that's my personal objective, like to do that. But I did learn so much more in that program. And one of the, the big ones that you mentioned earlier in my bio was ageism. And I want to disrupt these ageist stereotypes because that has a lot to do with the aging process psychologically that we may not even be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of that in the world, regardless of whatever culture you're in. It just, I don't know how it's seeped into society, but it's there. We have to recognize it. And, I got interested in this as well when I saw my parents aging in front of my eyes. And and my mother, Indian mother, she would give me a hard time every time I came to visit. And she would say, well, you're never home and you need to be home more. And then I looked at them a little closely and I just noticed that every time I came to visit, they seemed older. There were more wrinkles, less energy. And I did feel guilty at that point. I said, man, here I am traveling the world, having a good time as they're getting older. And so I started researching of how could I keep them younger and more vibrant so we could still have those experiences and I wouldn't be pressured into having just a few years left of them being fully vibrant. And so that's how we got into it. And so it's really interesting. Like you and I, we share this passion for how to slow down aging, how to reverse it. And I'm so glad you took this program because you've learned so much from the beginning. You said preconception all the way to the end and mental attitudes and not just biological aging. So let's talk about the mental attitudes, I think, a little bit. How does that come into play and why does mental attitudes change? For example, a lot of people wake up when they're in their midlife 40s. They're like, oh, I'm more spiritual now. Like, is it just a function of their hormones going down, or is it that they're noticing new things, including aging, and they feel that they're not immortal anymore? How does the mental shift happen from being fully vibrant and being full of life to being a little bit more reserved and thinking about the bigger context of things?
Yes, this is a big one. And so for everyone, that wake up call is a little bit different. And you had your wake up call, like sort of seeing your parents. I had mine. My mom died of breast cancer when she was only 57. So yeah, I'm 52. So it's like that was my interest. Sort of that's what really where I started my interest in aging and longevity. Although pre that, I was always interested in health and wellness. I'm from LA. I mean, to be honest, like you always want to look good in a bikini, but that kind of shifted when my mom died, and then my dad 10 years later of heart disease. So that is my, that's pretty scary. And I think that's when a lot of people have their wake up call and go, oh, I got to take care of my parents. I see them aging and this is my genes or this is my destiny. And what am I going to do? I don't want to be like that. And so with the psychological part that comes in, it's just super interesting, is that there's this model called the AIR model. Dr. Paul Nash created it, and it was called, and it's the acquisition. It was acquisition. I is internalization, and the R is which is the most important part, is the let me think about it a second. Reinforcement. Okay, so acquisition. And then the reinforcement part and the internalization, like this, think about this for a second. And so what we learned is that children as young as age 6 start to create ageist stereotypes. This is when we, in their head, they're observing their parents and how they're treating their own parents or how they're treating older adults in the society. And so by the time we start to see our first wrinkle or the first gray hair or start to feeling tired, we internalize this. We go, oh, okay, this is aging, and this is what's going to happen, and this is quote unquote normal. And then we reinforce it by continuing behaviors. If we're feeling tired, we go, oh, this is just me getting old. You accept it, you internalized it, you're reinforcing this into the community by walking a little bit slower, taking things a little bit slower. And this is not happening to everybody, but there are people like this, and this is really dangerous. This is really not only reinforcing those ageist stereotypes, but it's actually shortening people's lifespan because they're really accepting this and they're aging a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. And so this is why we need to disrupt these ageist stereotypes. If we see as a 6-year-old, a vibrant older adults who are working, who are jogging, who are using computers, who are, disrupting all these stereotypes, then we will not be so susceptible, will not be so vulnerable to internalize this and then repeat this throughout generation at generation. So that would save a lot of lives just by changing your attitudes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. When I started learning about the Blue Zones by Dan Buettner many years ago, before the lockdowns, I had the opportunity to travel to Okinawa. I wanted to go to Japan regardless, but I said, if I'm going to go to Tokyo, I'm going to take a flight to Okinawa and actually see for myself what's happening, just to reinforce what Dan was saying. And I landed in Okinawa, and I remember it was a concrete jungle. There was McDonald's, many McDonald's and Starbucks. And I go, surely I'm in the wrong place. Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. And then within a couple of days of being there, I learned it's a longevity village. That's 2 hours away by car. And so I luckily found some people that took me there. And I sat down with a 97-year-old man, a 97-year-old woman, and a 92-year-old man. And I had a chance to interview them for an hour, and they were translating, of course. But it was really cool. And the woman, I asked her, why do you wake up every morning? Her daughter said, not only does she wake up, but she puts her makeup on and gets ready in the morning. Wow. I go, for what? Who's coming to visit you? She goes, in case somebody comes, right? She's anticipating that somebody might come. And her biggest purpose was that she wanted to live to 100 because the whole town, her village, would celebrate her. That was the goal, right? And so we missed the purpose and we missed the goal. And like you said, we just fall into these stereotypes and we start reinforcing beliefs, which lead further into the negative self-talk. And there are studies from South Korea and others which have found that if you think that you're younger than your age, then there's actual more physical gray matter in your brain. So that is a direct correlation of you thinking that you're younger, which is so cool. So have you, in studying older populations that are over 50 or so, or even into the centenarians, what's some key findings as people transition in your world that really stood out to you?
What was interesting, pre-pandemic, I was also traveling a lot more throughout Asia, and I went to Bhutan and Cambodia and Vietnam and Hong Kong and China, and I would find these people and, looking for thriving older adults. And I would always ask, what do you think is the key to longevity? What is it? Why are you living so long and in a good condition? Mm-hmm. And I would say probably about 80% of them said, God willed me to live this long. They had no idea that they were actually exercising and sleeping well and getting good nutrition. And, we ticked all those boxes off, and, pretty much what Dan Buettner kind of looked at and share, and I would find all those things as well. But they would never attribute to that. It was really faith. And Dan Buettner did talk about faith as well, being a key driver to living a long, healthy life. And for certainly they were. And these were not people who had a lot of money, or, which in the US, we would correlate having more money or in general in the world, you have more money, you get better health just because you can afford better healthcare and better food, and you have better education and you have more knowledge. But these people, no, they just were, life was gently nudging them into a long, healthy life. But their faith was keeping them really probably contributing as well. So I found that a very interesting answer that they gave me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. And as people do start to get into their midlife, they seem to find faith more, which, hey, I'm all about it, because it helps you with purpose and just believing that somebody's got your back. So what are some of the issues, Zora, that you've come across that we should be aware of about aging that are not covered in the biohacking community that you and I live in?
I think what we don't cover enough in the biohacking community is that the ageist stereotype thing that I mentioned to you, that reinforcement and the internalization, and we need to disrupt that. I also think that people need to be a bit more aware of their community and their social circles, where that, and again, Dan Brutner has talked a lot about that as well. Harvard studies have proven, strong relationships, good, positive relationships are very important for longevity. And, in the biohacking world, we want to take a supplement, we want to do some injection, we want to cover the ice bathing and sauna, and all these things are really great for us. Nutrition, of course, and exercise, but, none of that is, really, I guess, as important as having those strong relationships. Why would you wake up in the morning to live, right? If you don't have any community, if you have no family you're connected with. So I would say nurturing your network is pretty key, that a lot of people may be kind of putting off to the side or not. Or as we get older, we also tend to not build new relationships. We focus on keep reinforcing and making stronger the ones that we already have. And that's just, that's all great. That's really wonderful, especially if they're still around. But we have to put ourselves in the shoes of an 80-year-old, and then 80-year-old, their friends are dying right and left. Who's next is the thing. And we never think about that. And, I'm in my 50s and you're in your 40s, right?
Yeah.
You 40 yet? It's hard to tell. And, it's just so far away. And it's really hard to imagine, but we will be there. And that's why I talk about aging, I talk about gerontology, and I talk about older adults, because every single one of us will be old if we're lucky. So if we're lucky to have the fortune to get old, we will be there. So if we don't take care of these ageist stereotypes, if we don't take care of our older adults, if we don't nurture our network now, then we're not going to be in a good position by the time we're 80, because it just doesn't happen like that. When you're 80, you go, okay, now I'm going to start working on my relationships. I mean, you can, and you always should, but it takes time. It takes years to build trust and build bonds. So one of the key things I'd say is reach out to your friends, nurture that network, take that vacation to visit your friend if they're far away, or meet your friend for coffee every morning, or whatever it is, take a break, make that phone call, whatever it is to keep that connection, but build good relationships. And when I talk about my energy program, which I'm all about energy, I always want to remove toxic relationships, those people who literally suck the life out of you. And we're kind of stuck to these people sometimes because we've known them for so long, they're part of our community, or they may be your family. How do I cut these people out? But they need to be cut out somehow. And you need to protect your energy, because this is a toxic relationship, and that will shorten your lifespan and your health span for sure. So, when we talk about relationships having, it doesn't mean you need 100 friends. You just need a couple of really, really good friends, but very good relationships that support you in what you're doing, inspire you, and make you happy.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And bonus would be, if these select few friends that you find and keep close, they also want to live a long life just like you do. Because as you said, if they're talking about, who's next, then none of you are going to live very long, I don't think. But if they're all about longevity and they're taking care of their health and using the latest science advancements to prolong the health and be as fit as they can, then that's just icing on the cake. And there's communities and conferences that you can go to, longevity conferences, at least in the US. I don't know about Europe, where you can go find a new set of friends that are interested in living longer, that are interested in being healthy, and not lay on their couch and talk about who's next. So
have you heard of the that you are the average of your 5 closest friends?
Right. Yeah.
right? So if your friends are negative, if they're unhealthy, well, you may also be that way. So if you want to have a healthy lifestyle, well, then you're probably better off finding those people who are health oriented.
Mm-hmm. And thankfully, now that we're coming back out of the lockdowns, there will be an opportunity for you to go to conferences or events or seminars where there's other people that are also there. So take advantage of that. I found communities in some of these events, and that's where I've made a lot of friends that are into health and wellness and longevity. So I can't speak highly enough of that. Okay, Zora. So let's talk about women over 50, which is a focus of yours. And that's a critical age for a woman because, the average age for menopause in women in the United States, I believe, is 51. And so a lot of things are changing, even perimenopause, and then going full on into menopause, and then the sex hormones change for women, progesterone, estrogen, and more. That leads to things that happen in their bodies and lots of changes in their life. So what is your perspective on what's changing in a woman's bodies that they should be aware of? And then we'll get into next what they can do.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of change. And that's when we need to be flexible and understanding and increase our knowledge what's happening. Many women in their 50s and even in younger have no idea about their cycle. They don't know anything about progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, none of this. It's quite new. I mean, it's unfortunate that we're not learning this when we're from puberty. I mean, honestly, we need to learn more. First time that somebody explained to me the menstrual cycle, it was a man. It was so embarrassing. And I was like, okay, I really got to get into this. But he knows more than me. Something's wrong. So, Reed, I would encourage women and men as well, if you care about your women, to please start to understand what this cycle is. We have our luteal phase and the ovulation phase, and we have 4 different phases, right? So we are like 4 different women in 1 month, right? And we have 4 different bodies. But when we hit perimenopause, all of these hormones, it just go up and down. They're so unpredictable. And it's the body changing and preparing for menopause, which is the day that you hit, with 1 year without your cycle. And it's just 1 day is menopause. And after that, it's called post-menopause. And before that, 5 years on average before you hit that menopause day, it's called perimenopause. So we need to, first of all, understand that. And during the perimenopausal period, when we have these fluctuations in hormones, we can have mood changes and we have weight gain and we have brain fog. And not everybody, some people have 0 symptoms. Some people have all of them, and they may go to a doctor who prescribes them antidepressants. And in fact, it's just, they got to talk about their hormones and their transition to menopause and what they can do to support that. So in terms of changes, yes, your body will change. And I highly encourage women of all ages, but particularly when you're going through this phase, to talk about it. I have had a client who has told me that when she was so relieved to talk to me about menopause, she says in her circle of friends, this was in Ireland, when she tries to talk about menopause, her friends go, shh, we don't talk about that.
Female friends?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Female friends.
Oh, wow.
I was so shocked to hear that. I was like, whoa, what, what century are we in? But that happens, and that has to be disrupted. And this poor woman has suffered for years and years with her perimenopausal symptoms and menopausal symptoms. So I think, we need to be aware of that, of understand our hormones, know what's happening, and understand that there are fluctuations, and then know how to support that transition. So now we don't have these horrible symptoms that sound really, really scary. And it shouldn't be. Everybody's afraid of menopause, and that, it's just a transition. It's just a phase, and actually can be a superpower, right? Once we support and get through it, we don't have periods anymore. Oh my God. We don't have to carry tampons and worry about, bleeding in the middle of nowhere. So there's some wonderful things that happen going through this transition. So we need to see the silver lining of this.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Okay. I want to touch on a topic that I hear about often because I'm passionate about hair wellness and hair growth. And that is the idea of thyroid function. And being optimally functioning, your thyroid. And I hear a lot of women talk about thyroid not being right, or them having low energy, sluggish, weight gain, which are common symptoms associated with thyroid. So for women that may be struggling with thyroid, first of all, how big of an issue is this from your vantage point when you're talking to women? And number two, how can they recognize and then take steps to remediate this problem?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Thyroid. I've never learned so much about thyroid until I hit 50. I was like, we didn't talk about this unless you had hypothyroidism or something. And it was very interesting because I did a podcast with Dr. Lauren Bramley, who's my anti-aging doctor. And I asked her, so what do you think is, the most important thing we need to know about thyroid, or what is a biggest problem about aging, energy. Sorry, it was all about energy. Mm-hmm. And she says, if I were to talk about energy, I would first tell my clients to please look at thyroid. Okay, that's super major regulator of your energy. But a thyroid, when it comes to women who hit around 50, it's very often related to stress. And it's sort of the adrenal glands, that are pumping out this cortisol and all these other stress hormones. They get tired, right? They get tired of pumping this stuff out, and they've just been taking a hit. And thyroid is also related with the cortisol and the adrenal glands and everything. So when you're able to control the stress or manage the stress, sometimes the thyroid gets regulated. But thyroid can be off for so many reasons. But like you said, some of the symptoms are the weight gain, and then the energy and the hair loss. Or thinning hair. And again, stress in your hair and your skin, they're very, very much correlated. And so we want to always look at our thyroid. And what I learned about thyroid is that you don't just go to a doctor and take a blood test and looks at your thyroid stimulating hormone, because very often that can be just fine, right? You're in the normal range. But in fact, when you take a deeper dive and you're looking at T3 and T4 and reverse T3 and free T4 and all these other, thyroid related hormones. I mean, you will find that a lot of stuff may be off. And so if you're struggling with thinning hair or low energy, which is what you're all about and what I'm all about, then I would certainly say, let's take a look at your thyroid. Even cholesterol, having a lot of women who after the age of 45, more or less, they start to have crazy cortisol. I don't know, or even healthy people. And so, crazy cholesterol. So the cholesterol and the thyroid are also related. I've had doctors and consulting my clients and even me included, and says, well, when we control the thyroid, your cholesterol will come back to normal. And super interesting. So again, when it comes to hormones, it's like a symphony, right? The cortisol, is the master regulator of all these other things, right? And cortisol is a stress hormone. Right. I had a very interesting client that had estrogen and progesterone as if she were in menopause, but she was only 36 years old. What the doctor did, she gave her just a tiny bit of cortisol. That's it. And all the other hormones came back into balance. And she didn't have to give her any of these other hormones. And it was just to jumpstart her own cortisol production, because she was kind of flatlining with cortisol. But when going back to thyroid, yes, I think thyroid is, I have there's another great podcaster. I don't know if you know Sandy Cruz. She's had thyroid cancer. She's all about thyroid. So whenever I have thyroid questions, she's one of my biohacking besties, and I contact her. I'm like, okay, what's the thyroid? Tell me what. But she has a lot of podcasting on thyroid and great. And she's just a wonderful person to reach out to. She's the podcast is the Sandy K Nutrition podcast, something like that. Okay. So yeah, thyroid is good.
Yeah. It's so important. I tell female clients that talk to me to get the full thyroid panel done, including antibodies, because then we have the complete picture of what's going on with the thyroid, and then we can address it, because thyroid, as you said, is very important for hair growth and even for more energy. And coming back to the topic of energy, other than thyroid, what other things or tools, tactics can women over 50 use to regulate, come back to balance, or have more energy than they've had in the past few years?
Yeah, interesting. I have this Biohacking Women 50 Plus Facebook group. And so we talk a lot about things like this. And we, especially menopause and the transition, what do they do? Some are taking bioidentical hormones, some are not. But even the ones who are, when I ask them, so, what's been most helpful in your transition to get more energy, for example, because that's what we're all about too. And they would say, getting their hormones in balance for sure. But it's not necessarily because of bioidenticals. They would say their nutrition and exercise gives them a whole new reboot in terms of energy. But energy can be, or lack of energy or fatigue can be for so many reasons. Maybe you're on medication and it has nothing to do with your hormones. I'm not saying it's just that. It can be because you're hanging around toxic people. Again, sucking the life out of you. Maybe you don't like your job. It's just, so what I always recommend people to do when they're lacking energy is to find out what the root cause of the problem is, because we can support more energy with a bit of maca, or trying to get, brain boosting, energy boosting coffee with MCT oils and things like that. But those are just supplementing and helping us get through until we find the root cause of the problem. So I would say, you just have to find what that is. And there's so many things that can be bringing you down, but yeah, for a menopausal woman or someone going through that transition, I would say one of the first things is to look at the hormones, just know where they're at, and you should know them anyways. And if your thyroid is fine, then great, we can move on and tick off all the other boxes.
That's great. Yeah. Stack ranking these and then going down the list. It's a great idea. So how can women that are over 50, or how is biohacking for women over 50 different than younger women or even men?
Oh, it's a big one. Yeah. So, in the biohacking world, we always think of Ben Greenfield, we think of you, we think of Sean Wells, we think of, all these great biohackers. And they've all been doing this for years, if not decades. And they look at the research and they're really good at that. And they're implementing it. It's working. It's fantastic. But when it comes to a woman, and if it comes to a woman who's around 50, sometimes these don't work. And they're like, why doesn't it work? Keto's so great, and it makes perfect sense. And I myself with my clients, keto, for example, is just not working with the women, and with the guys it was. Not, some women are fine, it works. But what we don't realize is that all these studies that have been, researched by these great biohackers, most of them are done on men. Most research is done on men. It's been like that for decades and decades. And it's only in, I think it was 1993, the NIH Revitalization Act demanded that women be included in research. Nobody wanted to research them because we're just too complicated or too risky, bunk up the studies. And, now our numbers are off because we have menopause and puberty and, hormone changes or pregnancy, and studies are expensive. And so nobody wants to waste their time and money with women. And it's really unfortunate because then the vaccines and the drugs that come out and these therapies and our biohacks are all based on men. So they work great. We know they work great for the guys. Now, the women, we don't know. We just don't know. There's not enough research. I can't say they don't work. I'm just saying we don't have enough research done. And even with this Revitalization Act that we have to include women in our studies, they're not always reported. The results that are on the women are not always reported. So they may just be left out because there's no, it's not required to actually include the results. So this is a really big problem. So I'm a huge advocate for getting more studies and more research on women. And if you're talking about an older adult, and forget even, just women and men, there's very little research on older adults. And we need much more of that because, we are having people now living in their 70s and 80s. What do we do with them? How do we prescribe certain drugs, or how do we prescribe certain therapies or diets or whatever it is? We don't know. We just can't because we don't know. And there's not enough studies on it. So I really want people to take in their biohacking techniques, whatever it is that you're going to try, with a grain of salt. Okay. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe you won't. I'm talking about to a woman over 50 because, because, well, you are different. You have hormones that are not taken into consideration when it's done on a man. A man has a 24-hour hormonal cycle. A woman has the 24-hour, but we also have the monthly cycle, right? If you're still cycling, and you can be still cycling in your 50s as well. So you need to take in consideration, how are you going to apply that biohack to yourself? So if you're a woman who is cycling and still, let's say you're in your 30s or 40s, well, should you be ice bathing every day? We don't really know. So that's why my recommendation is to do as much research as you can, but look at yourself. How do you feel? If your intuition, that's what one woman's superpower is, we have intuition. If your intuition says, don't do this every day, or don't do it so cold, or don't, alternate, just do it, and experiment with it. But as a biohacker, I love data. I always encourage people to write things down, right? You don't need, super gadgets. If you got the gadgets, the Oura rings, the BioStraps, and you can monitor your heart rate, fantastic. That's even more data, but you don't need to get that difficult. You can just get a piece of paper or put a spreadsheet on your computer, write down how you're feeling, how you're reacting. Does this biohack work for you? Maybe it works for you when you're, cycling in different parts of your cycle. Maybe it's, the week before you're about to menstruate. Maybe that's when you're having the worst results. I don't know, or the best. Mm-hmm. So I encourage women to always do your biohacking by yourself, your N of one experiment, because there's just not enough research on there. And don't be disappointed if it's not working for you. Just understand you're a woman and you're different. But you still can biohack. You just have to maybe alter it or do it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Okay. As a gerontologist, Zora, what are some of the best chances for people to live a longer and healthier life? And what can people do today to start improving those chances?
Oh, wow. Yeah. There's a couple of things that we can't really control, right? Because, and that's what I learned in gerontology is one, in the US, because I studied at USC, we're looking at a lot of data in the US, is to not be a minority. And, you can't control that. If you're white, you're probably you're going to live a bit longer. And that's what the studies have been showing. If you're rich, you're going to be living a bit longer too. So, maybe you can control that. Maybe you can, get a better education that will help you as well live a bit longer. So we have people who are just that step ahead, right? And there's other people who need to work a lot harder. And that's unfortunate. Although we do have the Latino paradox, it's quite interesting. Latino women seem to live longer than white women. So, and being born a woman is another advantage, right? Mm-hmm. If you're lucky, if you're a woman, because you probably live longer. Now, that doesn't mean just because you have all these criteria, you are going to live a long life. It's just the studies show you have a better chance at it. You have a step ahead. Now, you go, oh, well, I can't control some of these things. Your genetics as well.
You could change your gender. You could change your gender.
Yeah, that would be interesting studies to do, actually. When you change your gender, would you actually live longer? That would be very interesting. And so those are things, genetics also play a big role, even though we say it's 10 to 20% of getting a certain disease. We have control. We still have, the lifestyle and the diet and things like that we can change. But sometimes you just are dealt with an amazing set of cards. When you look at what's her name? Jean Clément, the longest living woman in the world. She used to smoke. She wasn't exercising. She was, not having the best diet. She had the, FOXO3 genes and these longevity genes, these anti-inflammatory natural genes that just, she can do whatever she wants. But, so if you won the genetic lottery, then you'll probably also live a longer life. But just because you dealt with a good pair of genes also doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want. I mean, those are the super genes, but most of us just don't have that. But we can change a lot, and we can prevent things. And I would say in my coursework, what we learned, one of the biggest risk factor for all diseases of aging is just getting old, just age. Age is the biggest risk factor. So that's why we always want to look at age as a disease. Like if we can fix aging, then we can fix a lot of these diseases of aging. And so we want to, well, okay, we're going to get old. So if we're lucky, right? So what can we do? What else can we do? Well, we can talk about prevention. Prevention is super, super important. And what popped up a lot in my physiology of aging class was smoking. If you can just stop smoking, like that's huge. Smoking is just one of the biggest risk factors as well for all of these diseases of aging, and obesity as well. Just being obese, you have these inflammation in your fat, right? And so we need to reduce this inflammation, because it's that chronic low-grade inflammation that does so much damage. And that's what smoking does. And that's what being obese does. So to be able to control our weight and being at a healthy weight, whatever that may be for you, because you can be a little overweight and live a very long life. So I'm not saying you need to be skinny. In fact, being a little bit fat is protective, right? We want to have a little bit of fat, especially women. So, but you don't want to be in that obese category. And you can also be very skinny and very unhealthy and have a very short lifespan as well. So being at a healthy weight is really important. So how do we get a healthy weight? Well, we want to be able to control our diet, whatever that may be for you, and exercise. Exercise is so huge. I mean, that exercise to me is one of those magic bullets like sleep, right? It just does everything, negates all the bad stuff that comes out. Not everything, but a lot of the stuff the inflammation's happening in the body is the damage from maybe foods that we're eating, or the pollution, or a lot of things are controlled by exercise. And so again, what does exercise mean? That can mean so many things for so many different people. An 80-year-old woman will have a very different exercise program than a 50-year-old man. So, you have to tailor make that. But I would say in my podcasting as well, when I ask a lot of these researchers and doctors that you and I both, interview, and they may be talking about peptides as the wonder, thing that will, extend our lifespan or biological age or whatever it may be. When you ask them, so really what do you think is the biggest factor in extending health span and lifespan? And so many of them say stress. Stress is such a killer. And I would say you can have the best diet and exercise all day, but if your stress is there, win. It's like trumps everything. So, I would say take stress really seriously. And we had a course called the Mind-Body Connection, a whole 3 months of studying the stress response, how cortisol is running throughout the body, how the HPA axis can get disrupted and broken, and how this affects diseases of aging. And one of my final papers was to take stress and say, how does that stress affect XYZ disease? And my professor said, choose anyone. They connect, you can connect them all to stress. And so I chose diabetes, but I could have taken Alzheimer's, I could have taken cancer, I could have taken anything and made that connection between stress and that disease of aging. So, again, when we talked about, say that when there's a Harvard study that came out and said, wait, strong relationships are key for longevity and aging. Yes. But if those relationships are toxic, if they're causing you stress, they mean absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah. Fantastic. There you have it, folks. Lots of tips on how to live longer and healthier. Thank you, Zora. One quick side note that I've learned, as you mentioned, women do tend to outlive men. And that's fascinating because when a woman's going through menopause, there is a lot of health challenges that come because of that hormonal imbalances or the hormones dropping so low. And in midlife or right in their 50s and 60s, it appears that women are less healthy than men, but over the long term, they outlive men. And maybe that's a function of they having better social connections or just them being stronger in the mind. That's definitely a possibility too, because men are stronger physically, but in a lot of cases, women can be stronger mentally. So there's interesting tidbits on how even with the worse off health initially, women can outlive men. So
yeah. And actually, women have more diseases than men. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of theories why women live longer than men. So, one of them would be women tend to go to the doctor more often than men, right?
Yeah.
You have, an issue and you're not going to be macho about it. You're saying, I need to go to the doctor, right? Or like you said, we have strong social circles. We have more oxytocin than men. We have 8 times more oxytocin than men do. So that is a purpose for that, is to make those bonds, and that's protective. And we do that to protect ourselves and our offspring. So when the shit hits the fan, well, we've got a whole tribe behind us helping us out. So, there's just, that's a whole other, we could talk a lot about that, but yes, you're absolutely right. Those relationships are super important.
Okay, we're coming up on time, Zora, but I want to talk about your new program that you have to reboot energy, especially for women. So tell us what this program's about and who's it for.
So it's a 4-week program called Reboot Energy for women 50 plus, because women 50 plus, that seems to be one of the biggest complaints. That when you go to a doctor's office, when you're talking to an older adult, it's usually energy and pain. So we're going to start off with the energy and how to reboot that energy. And it's a 4-week program where I'll have videos, pre-recorded videos, and every week we meet with live, and we have homework and we have Q&A, and we get a couple of speakers who will talk about hormones, because I'm not a hormone specialist. So I want to get professionals out there for you. And we will talk about how we can reboot our energy from a hormonal perspective. And that's pretty much it. You'll have it's a 4-week program, and it's still forming because I keep adding to it. I've been adding breath work. So got the breath work behind me as well under my belt. And I really think breath work can help a lot with rebooting energy and balancing hormones. And so I'm integrating that. So you'll learn a lot about the breath. And so I've got the program on the website, the wait list as well. So you just go to hackmyage.com. It's on that first homepage, and you just sign up for the wait list. And I will let you know when it's coming out. It'll probably be out in November. So we still have a little bit of time, but you get a 10% off if you just put your name on the list. You don't have to pay for anything in advance.
Fantastic. So that'll be at hackmyage.com. Tell us about your other social handles, Clubhouse, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you are and want to be found.
Yes. So it's always Hack My Age on Facebook and Instagram, and my website, of course. And I've got Clubhouse, Biohacking Women 50 plus. We have wonderful people on the panel, and we invite guest speakers as well. So we're moving that to once a week. I think it'll be on Thursdays, but just go to Biohacking Women 50 plus on Clubhouse, and the Biohacking Women 50 plus Facebook group. And that's a great place to offload, to ask questions. It's safe. It's a private group, just women, and we can discuss a lot of things that we just don't have time for in the Clubhouse, because we keep it just for 30 minutes. We don't want to take 3 hours of people's time. So we just kind of keep the conversation going there as well.
Fantastic, Zora. Thank you so much for your perspective and sharing everything you've learned in your gerontology program and in life as well. And thanks for coming on the Anti-Aging Hacks show.
Oh, thanks for having me.